All right, today is 19 November 2020. Today we're going to speak about the Korea and the Korean War all the way up to today. All right, so the do now, we're going to skip over that. All right, so we're going to do two key terms. The first is a proxy war. A proxy war is a war started by a major power that does not include the major power directly. Think of it like a puppets where the proxies are the big powerful countries. They're the puppet master, and the countries doing the fighting are the puppets. The other key term is the Cold War. The Cold War is a state of political hostility that existed between the United States and the Soviet Union between the years of 1945 and 1990. All right, some more key terms. Gross domestic product, the total value of goods and services a country produces in one single year. Per capita is a Latin term that means per a single person or per person. Human Development Index is a statistic of life expectancy, education, and economic indicators. It basically tells you how well developed your country is. And a coup d'etat is a sudden, violent, and illegal seizure of power from a government. All right, the Korean War starts. The Korean War starts after the division of Korea. In the two separate countries after the Second World War ends in 1945. These two governments were created in 1948. North Korea was a communist country supported by the Soviet Union, and South Korea was an anti-communist country supported by the United States of America. All right, the Cold War was going on at the time, and this division of the two countries was part of it. This could lead to a proxy war, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. All these were proxy wars. Also, during the Cold War, you would see a race to develop nuclear weapons, put a man on the moon, spy on one another, and any other thing that we call symbols of the Cold War are part of it. All right, and so the Korean War is definitely a part of the Cold War. In June of 1950, the Soviet Union, North Korea, using Soviet tanks and Soviet weaponry, invade South Korea. The North Koreans were supported by the Communist Chinese, and the North Koreans almost capture the peninsula. Later that year, the United States, as well as the United Nations, step in and help South Korea. And then by 1951, China was not just supporting North Korea, they were actually putting Chinese soldiers into the Koreas. The fighting during the Korean War was marked by extremes: extreme cold, extreme hot, snow. You get snow-covered mountains that would go below zero for days on end, and then you'd have summer heat well over 100 degrees. Large amounts of land were conquered and lost quite quickly. The capital city of South Korea, Seoul, was changed hands 4 separate times between North and South Korea. Fighting was incredibly deadly, incredibly intense. More than 5 million people in this 3-year war would go missing or would be captured or would be killed. All right, here are some images. Tanks, American tanks with tigers painted on them. All right, in 1951, the war was considered a stalemate where the fighting occurred near the old border for the most part, with very little territory switching hands after that first year. On July 27th, in 1953, a ceasefire was signed. The war is still legally, technically going on. They just agreed to stop actively fighting one another. So the Korean War right now is over 69 years old. Right? I wish this would animate. It's a GIF, and you can see the huge amounts of land gained and lost in a very short period of time. If you go on Wikipedia for the Korean War, you would be able to see this, and this would usually play in class as well. Between the two countries is the Demilitarized Zone, or the DMZ. This is a buffer between the two nations. There have been some skirmishes, some arguments over the DMZ between the two, but for the most part, stability has kind of been the norm there. In the middle of the DMZ is what we call the JSA, or the Joint Security Area. These are neutral buildings where the two countries can meet face to face and discuss issues. And there's a door on either side of the building. Each door leads into a separate country. One leads into North Korea, the other leads into South Korea. All right, here's the DMZ. There's been 4 different tunnels discovered under the DMZ. These were attempts by the North Koreans to invade South Korea. Here are the JSA buildings, right? This big building in the background, that is North Korea. In the foreground where the soldiers are standing, that's South Korea, and then the blue buildings are the JSA. Here's inside the room, North Korean soldiers, right? And this is the line. This is the actual line that separates North and South Korea. All right, pretty crazy to look at, but it is true. That is there. Right? After the Korean War, the two countries remained separated. Officially, South Korea is the Republic of Korea, and officially, North Korea is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Here's the flag of South Korea. Here's the flag of North Korea. Right, a little bit of history of the South Korea. Following the Korean War, South Korea was a poor nation led by this man, a very corrupt leader known as Syngman Rhee. In 1962, General Park, a very militaristic, nearly dictator man, rose to power, and he ruled until 1979. He was ruthless. But under his guidance, South Korea grew quite rapidly economically. They built freeways, subways, roads, and this rise in the economy is known as the miracle on the Han being the main river through South Korea. And there's the growth of the economy, pretty staggeringly uphill in a good way. In June of 1979, General Chun Doo-hwan led a coup d'etat, an overthrowing of the government, and ruled with an iron fist. It revealed that in 1987 he tortured the government he ran tortured a college student to death, and this led to the first democratic elections. And in December of 2016, President Park Geun-hye was impeached and replaced by that man on the left, and that's Moon Jae-in. Okay, so the DPRK, North Korea. It starts in 1948 and rules from 1994. The country was ruled by Kim Il Sung, that's that man on the left, as a dictatorship. He preached this idea of juche, or self-reliance, that the North Korean people could only rely on North Korea, that they had to seize their own destiny and work for their country as a group. Immediately after the Korean War, it was quite successful economically, and up until 1976, it had a higher GDP than its neighbor to the south. In 1976, however, China decided it was going to become closer with the United States and became a little bit more hostile to North Korea, and the North Korean economy has collapsed. In the mid-1990s, the country was desperate after a period of intense flooding. There were some real issues in the country, and they began opening up conversation with South Korea in what we call the Sunshine Policy. However, in 2001, American President George W. Bush declared that North Korea was part of the axis of evil, and the United States once again took a much more hostile stance towards North Korea. All right, what is it like between the Koreas today? Originally, there was not originally, but early on, there was bombings of planes, hijacking, murders, and shots fired over DMZ, and there have been real issues between the two countries. North Korea has continued to develop nuclear weapons, despite protests from the world and South Korea specifically. There has been attempts, but also a failure to improve relations between the two countries. And while North Korea is one of the poorest countries in the world, South Korea is one of the wealthiest. Here's some North Korean missile tests. And then the one question I want you to think of is, do you think in your lifetime the two Koreas will ever be united?